7 Things No One Tells You About Retirement. Today, your session is hosted by Lumena Financial Strategies. As a reminder, this session is being recorded and will be made available on the events page of our website once approved. If you see that I change your name in the session, that's solely for privacy reasons. Your moderator and speaker today is Allison Fleming, President of Lumena Financial Strategies. Allison is a certified financial planner practitioner, and for those of you who may be joining us for the first time, please allow me to introduce her. Allison has been a financial advisor since 1989 and serves clients in 29 states across the country. She holds a bachelor's degree in speech communication from Cal State Long Beach and believes that we must always adapt to the changing environment, remain current, and take advantage of opportunities to improve our clients' lives. Our local motto, "Be a long-term thinker, not a short-term worrier," serves as the cornerstone of her discussions.
So we have some good news. So Miles Fleming, our Executive Vice President, is on the line with us today. He's also an insurance specialist. He's going to be doing a couple of webinars on Medicare coming up here in the next 6 months. So keep your eyes open for that. We have Britt Stevens, who is our Vice President. He works in partnership with me on most client appointments. We have Peter Fink, our stock picker extraordinaire, who's been having loads of fun lately. We have Damian Feldman, who's our client experience manager. He's the person that you'll talk to most often when you call into the office to schedule appointments, or he might be bothering you to schedule an appointment. We also have Terry Jocelyn, who's our executive assistant and administrative manager. She's behind the scenes most of the time, although you may talk to her on the phone. We have Maddie Yola, who is in our San Pedro location. One of the good pieces of news that I wanted to share with you is we finally secured a location in San Pedro that we don't have to share as like an executive suite or anything like that. So starting May 1, we'll have a secondary location up there in San Pedro. Maddie will be working from there full time, and then Britt and I are traveling back and forth to meet with clients in that location. We have Kaylee Kaufman, who is our client care coordinator. And we have Justin Romine, who has been working with us for a couple of years, as he started as a summer intern, then stayed on board part-time while he finishes up his degree. Well, he's graduating and has decided that he's going to be joining us full-time when he graduates in June, coming back to San Diego, and he's going to be, we'll call him Brit 2.0. We also have Lucy Adame, who is also an administrative assistant. She's working part-time as well, mainly behind the scenes supporting Caress. And finally, we have Caress Vera, who's our creative director, the voice from the sky that you hear, who runs all the webinars. And Caress also has some very exciting news to share. Caress, you wanna talk about that real quick, and we'll show them a demo at the end?
Sure. So for Financial Literacy Month, which is the month of April, we'll be launching a new addition to our financial literacy hub called Mind and Money. It was requested by several young adults who gave us some feedback on the site and said, "Hey, what do I do when I move in with someone and or enter a relationship? I really don't know how to talk about money." And it was a great idea. So we just expanded on that and have a new section called Mind and Money that we're going to launch in the month of April.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. So you'll see a little sneak peek if you stay till the very end. All right, so with that, I would like to show you our disclosure slide, which gives you all the things you need to know, and you've now been fully disclosed. So with that, I would love to invite my friend Doug Lewis to join us here on the camera. Hi, Doug.
Hi, how are you, Allison?
I'm good. How are you?
Good, very good.
So just for our audience, I met Doug first when somewhere along the line, we heard that he had some creative ideas on how to access 529 plan funds and avoid the 10% penalty. And so we met and we went through several of those ideas, which have been helpful for clients along the way as those items have come up. And then Caress and several other of our team members attended a workshop at our LPL conference in San Diego last year, where his company presented this workshop that he will present to you today. So I think that it's really great that Doug has taken his time. Let me just introduce you to him a little bit. He's been in the industry for 34 years, and he speaks regionally and nationally on the economy, investments, investor behavior, and things like that. He's a former naval officer. He's also a certified financial planner and has an MBA in finance from San Diego State University. He's been married for 34 years, which is impressive, and raised 3 Eagle Scouts and college graduates in Carlsbad. So he is a local San Diego boy. And with that, I would just love to turn it over to you, Doug, and take it away. And I'll be here if you need me to chime in. Otherwise, I'm just going to go and listen to all the wonderful things you have to say.
Perfect. Well, thank you for that introduction, Allison, and welcome to everybody that's joining us this afternoon. It's a little rainy here in San Diego, but that's okay. We've had good weather. So let me just remind everybody that you were sent yesterday a checklist that had a series of questions on it that, hopefully if you got a couple minutes, you could kind of just review it. And the idea there is to start sparking up your mind about some issues that you might want to think about as either you approach retirement, or I know that some of you are in your first couple of years of retirement, or maybe you're helping a friend of yours along on their journey in retirement. And these are some things that our academic team that developed the content came up with. So I just remind you that you have that. So let me share my show. So I do like to set expectations. So there's 7 things that we're going to try and cover today, and we have plenty of time to do that. And so we'll have plenty of time for questions at the end. But we want to go a little bit backwards in retirement history, cover the wrong top 10 list in all homage to David Letterman, talk about the unspoken side of retirement, talk about a miscalculation that many people make as they transition from working into retirement, review some cliche advice that, frankly, I think you'll agree with me, probably goes wrong, and talk about the broken record of longevity, and finally, retirement's greatest paradox. So let's start with the history. I'm going to move one little slide over there a little bit. So it started back in Germany with Otto von Bismarck back in 1899, where they created the very first Social Security system. We didn't get around to doing this until the Great Depression with FDR back in 1935, where we established the U.S. Social Security system here. 403B plans came 20 plus years later. Those are the plans that nonprofit employees can use, and many school teachers, like my wife, who's a 4th grade teacher right here in San Diego County. In 1974, a term that you may have read about in whatever media you follow, ERISA, which is basically all of the legislation that comes out of Congress that deals with retirement plans and all of the laws that can protect those retirement plans. 401ks came along about 4 years later, and RMDs, required minimum distributions, were created for IRAs in 1982. It's kind of interesting. All we talk about now are 401ks, but they're really not that old. In 1997, one of my favorite devices, the Roth IRA, came into existence. And then in 2006, the Roth 401k made its debut. So you've got a couple of different options there. And these are all things that you can discuss with Allison and the team as you get closer to retirement and you kind of want to decide, well, which bucket am I going to start drawing from? That's a big part of the financial planning process. So point number 1 from history, the retirement framework is out of date. As you can see from that brief history that we went through, a lot of the tools that we can now access today are 100 years old or 40 or 50 years old. They're not necessarily keeping up with some of the challenges that we face in trying to create buckets of money that can provide us retirement income. One of the things that I think is kind of interesting when you talk about Social Security, and that's always a hot topic for our politicians in the country, is back in 1940, a woman by the name of Ida Mae Fuller became the first person to receive a Social Security check for $22.54. Her quote is shown right there. But I think if memory serves, she only paid in for about a year or two, and she drew benefits for about 30 years. So that definitely worked out for her. Now, this was in an era when I think there were 16 or 17 workers that were contributing to each person who was drawing a benefit. Those numbers have changed rather dramatically in our country today, where I think we're down to 3 or 4 workers per Benny. So you can see why you sometimes read in the financial press that the Social Security system is under duress. It's kind of a numbers thing. 401ks were created as Congress kind of looked ahead and saw that there might be some issues with Social Security. I think right now, I took a continuing ed class earlier this week on retirement planning. Many Americans rely on Social Security to fund their total retirement, which it's not a lot of money. And so most folks, hopefully all of those of you here on the call today, are contributing or did contribute to a 401k, a 403b, or what have you. Ideally, that's going to give you a much greater standard of living once you're in retirement. Now, it's estimated that baby boomers, so that's a generation from 1946 to 1964. I'm proud to say I was one of the last boomers, born in 1962. And so this year I am 62. So I'm approaching this time that we're talking about, but that they may need to fund 70% of their own retirement because Social Security is estimated to only cover about a third of it. So finally, and this is part of the process today, many people just don't understand IRAs and Roth 401k benefits because let's call it like it is. It can be a little complicated with all of the tax rules that go along with it. But clearly, one rule you should keep in mind, or you probably have kept in mind, and that's pay yourself first. You definitely want to make sure of all of the demands on your cash flow that you put aside money for retirement. I was talking to somebody early this morning. They were telling me about their 20-year-old son, and they can't get them to put away money into their 401k. And so I suggested just remind them of the match, right? And get 100% match on the first 3 to 5%. And she was pretty appreciative of that idea. So anyway, it is a lifelong constant discussion. Let's talk about David Letterman's wrong top 10 list. Up number 1, death of a spouse. I'm fortunate. I've been married 34 years, but I can't imagine. And I've had dear friends of mine who've lost a spouse, and it is a very traumatic incident. Not far behind, divorce of a spouse, obviously. Marital separation that would precede the divorce, usually. And only then does something not related to marriage come in the list, and a jail term at number 63. And that's tied with death of a close family member. Personal injury, there's marriage. So the initial marriage is not nearly as stressful. Although I remember when my wife and I got married down at Pacific Beach almost 35 years ago now. That was a pretty stressful day. But nevertheless, getting fired at work, hey, this stuff happens. So, and marital reconciliation is not nearly as stressful as getting married or certainly the death of a spouse. And finally, at the end of the top 10 list comes retirement. Now, I don't know in the here and now when you're rapidly approaching retirement or you're a year or two into it, whether you would agree with this, because maybe you are feeling some stress. I know it's something that at the same time, I'm looking forward to, but I'm questioning the decisions. Do I want to retire in 3 or 4 years? Or maybe, depending on what the economy's doing, should I extend it out and go 7 or 8? It's a very difficult decision, and hopefully the team at Lumina can help you with that. But this is how the stressors rank. Why is it so stressful? Well, as these things start to come on the screen, these are all things in your life that have led up to retirement that can create stress. But I think in large part because retirement, it's kind of a one and done decision. You don't get a second chance, particularly if you're earning a very good living, you've had a lot of professional success, it's quite often once you exit the workforce, it would be very difficult to go back into a job with the same responsibility and the same income potential. I think that's the number one reason I hear as I go around Southern California and talk to people delivering this content that they share with me kind of after the seminar, that they're so stressed about it. They want to get that decision right. Now, the unspoken side of retirement. These are three topics that aren't necessarily comfortable to talk about, certainly not to experience. But in terms of depression, we've all known folks that have gone through a period of their life where they were depressed, not feeling themselves. Well, it's interesting. Retired people are twice as likely to report feeling symptoms of depression. The likelihood of clinical depression increases about 40% after retiring. I would think in large part because of the next topic, isolation. 25% of all seniors 60 and above report feeling isolated and lonely. I was reading an article in today's paper about Meals on Wheels and how often the employees, the deliverers of the meals, report that they are the only person who checks on someone who maybe is not mobile anymore or their eyesight is bad enough they don't have access to driving. And the only person that's checking on them is the person that 3 times a week delivers meals. Think about that. And you don't want to think about it, I guess, is kind of the point of the seminar. But 43% of seniors will go days without talking to other people. And all they have available perhaps is a TV or the internet or what have you. Finally, of the three topics, addiction, right? Alcohol is the most used drug among older adults. 65% of people 65 and over report high risk drinking. Now, all of us 5 years ago this month experienced the international pandemic that was COVID, right? And, alcoholism, addiction, those rates of that happening in the general public all went up. And I think it created a situation, certainly for me, where I would talk to friends and they would start happy hour at 1 o'clock or 2 o'clock, in part because they were kind of bouncing around the house. But it was sort of a foretaste, if you will, of what potentially could happen when you combine it with a little bit of isolation. So these are all three things I think as you approach retirement that you have to be on guard for, particularly with your friends, right? Maybe friends that are several years older than you want to make an effort to try and check in on them because these things are absolutely happening. Retirement magnified, right? Three similar but still different situations. Professional athletes. 78% of NFL players are either bankrupt or under financial stress within 2 years of retirement. Now understand, most professional athletes, certainly the NFL, probably Major League Baseball is the same way, they have very short careers. Some of them are making lots of money. 60% of the NBA players are broke within 5 years of leaving the sport. Now that kind of runs the gamut from the ones maybe that are up in Oceanside here in San Diego County in the G League and then don't make it, to the ones that are getting the big contracts that we read about in the paper where, you see someone's getting big money to play a game and it, sometimes can be a little distracting. Lottery winners. This one I thought was very interesting. 70% of lottery winners end up broke within 7 years. Now, I did not read the footnote. I haven't been able to find it. I don't know what that dollar amount was. Is it lottery winners 10 million and above? I assume it's at least a million type of number. I mean, if you win a scratcher, it's really not germane to our discussion. And the one that's funny, if any of these could be considered funny to me, prison escapes. 60% of prison escapees are caught within the first 24 hours. 85% are caught within a week, thankfully, right? For all of us here on the outside. And it kind of points out the danger in thinking about either a prison escape or retirement as an endpoint. right? Without thinking through that time frame of, well, what's going to happen on the other side? Obviously, these prisoners had endless amounts of time to plot how are they going to get out. And we've seen these things in movies, right? But what do you do once you're on the outside, right? I mean, the only one that I think was successful was that Tim Robbins movie where he was wrongfully imprisoned. Anyway, one of my favorite movies. And of course, now I can't remember the name. Anyway, but think about it in terms of retirement.
Shawshank Redemption.
Pardon me?
Shawshank Redemption.
Oh, yes, the Shawshank Redemption. Thank you. Great movie. Morgan Freeman was also outstanding in that movie. But think about retirement not as escaping from prison of work, right? And it is a journey. You have to think through that time frame. So the number 4 on our agenda, so we're halfway through, major transition miscalculations. So you all recognize this. This is a seesaw. What you gain in retirement is time or time freedom, energy, because you're not working that 8 to 5, 9 to 5 job. You don't have a commute of however many hours or minutes you spend on the freeways commuting. But what are you losing? What are you losing from your professional career? No matter what it is that you do, right? You're part of a team. Usually, not all the time, but typically you're part of a team. You have a routine, right? Hopefully 4 days a week, 5 days a week, whatever it is. You're getting up. You have a reason to get up by a certain amount of time, right? I think the one that's often skipped over is identity. Imagine you're at a backyard barbecue with some neighbors, or maybe you're across town meeting some new people or what have you. How do you introduce yourself? I would argue most of you, if you're still working, introduce yourself in terms of your profession. And one of the first questions you get asked if you were already retired is, well, what did you do when you were working? But that's kind of how we identify, is what we spend 40 to 50 to 60 hours a week doing. Think about the mental challenges that come with being employed, right? You're constantly on the go. You're faced with different challenges. I mean, that's why you have a job, right? And hopefully you're well compensated, because it is challenging. Things happen. AI cannot solve everything. You need a human element, social connection, right? The old water cooler conversation. Last week, people were talking about March Madness. I'm a big college basketball fan, right? All of those things you do because you're currently working. Every workplace is different. Everybody has a different experience. But my point is, you have an experience that once you retire and you leave that workplace environment, you're not going to have anymore. You've got to recreate it. And finally, physical activity. Just the process of getting in the car and commuting. You don't have to be a ditch digger or do manual labor, but you're physically active, walking around an office. During the course of my day, I go from office to office, out of a car, out in the elements. I go upstairs whenever I get a chance, rather than an elevator, 3 or 4 stories. There's a lot of physical activity that comes with a job that, unless you plan for it, when you transition into retirement, you're probably going to miss, right? So thrive versus survive. The positive emotion you get at work when you complete a big project or you give a seminar like this. I guarantee you, I will be charged up when my son and I cook dinner tonight, and I'll be telling them about, all the questions I got or what have you. What am I going to do in retirement, right? Engagement, whether you're a leader or a teammate being led, right? It's kind of energizing. You're definitely mentally engaged. You're forcing your brain to problem solve and to work and to communicate, make your ideas heard, listened to, and acted upon. Relationships, I just mentioned, being part of a team. Everybody usually wants to be part of a team. Are there times when you're working where you want to go solo? Of course there are, but it's that opportunity to be part of a team, to be identified, that is really nice at work. In retirement, not so much. You've got to go out and create that. right? Meaningfulness. I talk to my 3 adult boys all the time about meaningfulness. You want to have a profession, and it may not be that first or second job where you're well compensated, but you're doing something that is meaningful. Maybe you can't change the world, but you can certainly have a positive impact on one person. And so if you do that enough, you do kind of change the world. But through employment, you have a defined purpose. Some would say it's your job description. As you transition into retirement, how are you going to replace that meaningfulness, that reason to get up and be at your best during the day? It can be a difficult transition. And then achievement. Of course, there's the things like getting a bonus, getting promoted, getting recognition, what it is, whatever it might be. You're not going to have those unless they're self-created in retirement. One perfect example is maybe find a charity that you're very supportive of, that you can get involved in. Not that you're going to do it 40 hours a week, but maybe you could do it 10 hours a month, something that gave you a little bit of schedule, that gave you a greater sense of purpose, right? So cliche advice, it kind of drives off of the last slide that we just saw. My big message is retire with something instead of retire to something. Retirement is not a destination where you just arrive and stop, right? Second point. First, we make habits, and then our habits make us. Our habits define us, right? There's so many books out there that you can read. One of my favorites is from a Navy SEAL Admiral McRaven. And the title of the book is something along the lines, and you probably see it behind me, is Make Your Bed. Get up in the morning and make your bed. And that's what they train those Navy SEALs to do. Because two things are going to happen. One, you're going to accomplish something to a standard and you're going to get a little mental feel good. And two, at the end of the day, you come back to something that you did, a reminder. And everybody likes to come back to a made bed. Number three, we do what we know, default behaviors. And this is really related to number two in the habits, right? Habits define us, default behaviors define us. It's easy to fall into a pattern of either negative or just nonsensical behaviors. I do it today because I did it yesterday. Work is kind of like that. But then when you retire, you don't have any default behaviors. And that can be disconcerting for a lot of people. One of the biggest points, retirement doesn't change us or make us better. Instead, it magnifies who we already are. And I can't emphasize that enough. With the hundreds of people that I talk to at public seminars that have retired after they've seen this content, and they would come up to me and say, that was the most important point of the entire session, right? You have to create your retirement persona before you retire. You can always adjust, right? And learn. I would like to say, as humans, we can always learn from our mistakes, or on the margin, learn how to do things a little bit better. Finally, the best way to live a successful life in retirement is to create it before you get there. I mentioned a moment ago a nonprofit. My wife and I are planning to spend some time at a San Diego area nonprofit called Just in Time that focuses on helping kids transition out of the foster care system. Because you might not know this, but at age 18, they're normally just given a bag and said, there's the door, you're out on your own. Having raised 3 young men, I can't imagine any of my 3 sons being on their own at age 18 while they're still in high school. But that's literally what happens, certainly in the state of California. So this nonprofit tries to help with that. And my wife and I, having raised 3 boys, think that's kind of important. The statistic is what really got our attention. Over 45% of graduates from the foster care system within 12 months end up homeless, right? So that's something that we're already starting to volunteer a little bit of time on. But once we retire down the road, that'll kind of be something that gives us meaning. So you've got to create that retirement life, not just with something meaningful, but your physical behaviors, your activities, your socialization. You got to start working on all that before. And if you're 1, 2, 3 years already in retirement, my guess is you have already started to do that. But if you're feeling at all just a little bothered or a little unhappy, I wouldn't say anybody on the call is feeling depressed, but maybe you have a day that's not as good as the last day, maybe rethink some of these things, right? Now, when do people consider themselves old? As you might expect, the longer we're on this planet, the farther out our old age definition becomes, right? I know when I turned 40, I did Mount Whitney here in California. I couldn't have imagined being 60, and here I sit at this camera at age 62, right? So you can see right there on the graph, I don't need to read it to you, as you get older, right? You put that day where you're feeling old out in the future. And the key to that is physical exercise. That's why I like this graphic of the woman there jumping, right? I mean, balance is everything in retirement. And even if it's just walking around the block or simple stretching there in the house, physical activity as you age is so critically important. So it's not that we're living longer, but rather that it's taking longer to feel old. I think that's a good thing, right? But unfortunately, here in America, certainly corporate America, I don't think has successfully adapted to longer lifespans and working years, right? For those of you who are still working, or those of you that are now retired and looking back, I know in my profession, at 62, I'm thought of as the old guy, right? And part of it's I got gray hair and I kind of make the joke all the time, but it's just corporate America wants to put you out to pasture if you're not the CEO by the time you hit age 60, right? So applying the same logic, when Social Security was created, early benefits would not now start until age 80. So here are some key things that our thousands of hours of research have kind of come out in surveying people, things you need to think about as you're in retirement. And I highlighted in yellow the three that really speak to me. But one, you've got to learn how to say no to adult children for a variety of things, right? Because they have time on their side. They can make adjustments on their life journey. Whereas as you enter into retirement, you've probably got 30 to 40 years, hopefully, of happy, healthy lifestyle that will involve your adult children if it's appropriate, right? One of the challenges that folks have as parents do require care as they age is that siblings can disagree on how that gets provided. And you might get a little bit of sabotage in there. Retirement is reconnecting with lost passions and hobbies. Now, I know, at least in my case, in COVID, when my kids all came home from college, I was able to spend some extra time reconnecting with some hobbies that I had in high school and college that I then shared with my adult boys. Hopefully, during COVID, you experienced a little bit of that. It was kind of a pretest, if you will, for retirement. I mentioned volunteer options already, gave you a personal example on that. I think this next one, accepting physical constraints, that can be difficult for just about anybody. But ideally, with a well thought out workout plan or walking plan or a hobby, you can hopefully be proactive. Obviously, a regular relationship with a general practitioner is an important part of that, so they can monitor trends. I think this next one is just good advice for anybody. Learning from mistakes and not dwelling on the past, not constantly playing that history book in your head of mistakes you might have made, decisions you didn't make. You just got to move on. And that's particularly important in retirement. On a similar fashion, not holding a grudge and being quick to forgive, right? Regularly getting out of the house, I put in yellow. So critically important, right? Learning new things and meeting new people. I mean, again, a lot of these are just good advice for anybody of any age, but I think particularly to avoid some of the pitfalls of retirement, these are critical things that hopefully you can employ. Um, Finally, retirement is kind of emotionally charged. The press talks about it a lot. They paint these idyllic pictures. You see the advertising on TV, but clearly there is no one definition for successful retirement. Everybody's on their own journey, and that's what's so wonderful about it. And I put this one in yellow. A successful retirement isn't one without problems, but rather one in which you learn to overcome them and hopefully give back. Give back to your family, give back to your friends, give back to your community. Resilience, a positive mindset, and getting support from these friend networks and family networks that you build up are certainly essential and key. So I did mention, and there's a little visual there in the right-hand corner about the checklist that you got later. We're going to send out, or maybe it was sent out, a white paper that's kind of a more of an academic, narrative description of the research that went into some of these bullet points that I gave you today. And then I've got, 7 or 8 things listed there of if you're just trying to kind of brainstorm, spitball it, if you will, ideas that maybe you hadn't thought about, book clubs, gardening clubs, where we have a lot of professional and more college teams around here. I mentioned I'm a big college basketball fan. I went to the University of North Carolina. I'm a Tar Heel, but I'm a season ticket holder for the Aztecs, where I did my MBA. And I just love going to those games with my neighbor. I'll take clients, a lot of fun. I hope once I do finally retire to take cooking classes because I want to cook more for my wife. I'm not very good at it now. And it's very difficult, at least for me, to learn how to cook well when she's in the kitchen because she's very good at it and she can't help herself from quote unquote teaching me. Nevertheless, pickleball, that's all the rage. Just get a soft paddle so it's not as noisy. I mentioned the charity. And again, I can't emphasize enough some kind of physical exercise, and it could take so many different forms. Just walking through your neighborhood where you get the physical exercise and you meet your neighbors. It's amazing how many people you meet when you walk a dog, right? Because dogs have to be walked about the same time every day. That's just kind of nature. And so any dog owner in your neighborhood, you're going to meet them. Now, I'm not saying change your retirement lifestyle by getting a dog, but certainly that's one way to force yourself to do it. Trust me, though, that's a big commitment. And there's my disclosure page. So
that's great. It's so true. All of the things that you've said, and we have a large client base, as you know, and we've seen a lot of people go through that life transition into retirement, and it is a weird one because you go along, and then all of a sudden you don't have that same tether to how you've defined yourself, unless you're one of those people who the job has been sort of sidebar and life has been created around it. So thank you for all of your insight. Next month, we've got another speaker, and this is actually somebody that we recently met with through Corebridge, Marissa Force, helping taking the emotions out of investing. Sort of along the lines of the Mind and Money Financial Literacy Month, we were trying to find someone with a good theme, and this one fits very well. So it'll be this, and then we'll also spend a little bit more time on the Financial Literacy Hub to share a few more things. If you have any questions, of course, you can email us, you can call us. We welcome your calls, and Damien is standing ready to set those appointments so that we can make sure that we answer all your questions. Doug, thank you again for joining us, and Caress, thank you for doing such a great job on all this, and we will see you guys next time.